Hey everyone, Gaurav Gaisenn here, and today I'm going to demonstrate to you the topic, the conquest of England. Now, before we get to know about the conquest of England, we'll have to first take a look on who are Vikings. Now, Vikings were seafaring Norse people from southern Scandinavia. They raided, pirated, traded, and settled throughout parts of Europe and explored westward to Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland, which is actually Northern America, from the late 8th century to the late 11th century. And now we'll have to know how Vikings actually infected Paris. And now the Danish Viking named Rollo decided to raid Paris, but the raid didn't go that well and they were eventually captured. But the king of the Franks, Charles the Simple, decided to give them a region in northern France. He wanted this to happen because he wanted West Francia to be protected from other Vikings. So hence he gave a land in the region. So this region was called the Duchy of Normandy, with Rollo being its first ruler. Now the Vikings then turned full on French and by converting to Christianity and learning the French language. And so we'll have to also know about the how Vikings affected England as well. Now England also had its Viking problems because in the 800s the Danish Vikings conquered most of England, whereas the Anglo-Saxons they eventually got their territories back, but they left some Viking settlers in their regions. So within this period of 955 AD to 1016 AD, there were these many kings who actually did a little bit effect on the conquest of England by the Normans. So these were the Anglo-Saxon kings from 1955 to 1016 AD. They're Edric the All-Fair, Edgar the Peaceful, Edward the Martyr, and Althred the Unready. So let's take a look on Edric the All-Fair. So he actually became the ruler from 23rd November 955, but he just died on 1st of October 959, and eventually his throne went to his brother Edgar the Peaceful. So he ruled for 16 years, but eventually he had two wives and both of them had two children. And so this successor was Edward the Martyr. So he actually ruled for 3 years, but he eventually got assassinated by his second wife, by Edgar the Peaceful's second wife, and his son Alfred the Unready became the king of England. But there was a little bit of controversy happening during his reign, and that was the Saint Bride's Day massacre. Now, the Saint Bride's Day massacre was the killing of deans in the Kingdom of England on Friday, the 13th of November 1002, which was ordered by King Alfred the Unready because one of his nobles just said Alfred that these Viking settlers can come together and kill him. So that's why he decided to go for this massacre. But this eventually actually led to the Danish Vikings conquering England. So during that time, the king of England was SWEYN FORKBEARD. He ruled only for 1 year, and eventually Alfred he just came back from his exile and he got the kingdom back after his death. So then Alfred the Unready just ruled for another 2 years. And after ruling for another 2 years, what happened after SWEYN FORKBEARD's death was that his eldest son Harald II became the king of Denmark, while his youngest son Snut was proclaimed as the king of England by the people of Danilo. But however, the English nobility sent for Alfred, as I already said, to upon his throne from exile and in Normandy in the spring of 1014, and he managed to drive Snut out of England. So Snut soon returned and became the king of all England in 1016 after the death of Alfred and after the death of Alfred's son, which is Edmund Ironside. So Snut succeeded his brother as becoming the king of Denmark as well in 1019, and he eventually also ruled Norway, parts of Sweden, Pomerania, and Schleswig. So eventually he became to be called as Snut the Great. And with this, we'll now move on to who's Edward the Confessor. So now Edward the Confessor is one of the youngest sons of Alfred, and he became the king of England from 1042 to 1066. But we moved so back in time. So what happened during this period of before Edward the Confessor's rule? So Snut the Great and his sons Harold Hereford and Harald Snut, they ruled over England for over a combine of 26 years, from 1016 to 1042. But after Harald Snut's death, the English throne reverted the House of Wessex under Elthred's youngest son, which is Edward the Confessor, as I already told. So with that, Edward the Confessor became the new king of England. So let's move back to him. Now, while you're being the king in the Middle Ages, normally not your entire country would support you at first. But if you have a powerful position, if you have one person who's very powerful, and if you're like allying with him, and he will only give you some ideas, so then England will be your you will be the king of England. So then everybody will start supporting you. So Edward the Confessor had one such supporter, that was Godwin of Wessex. So actually, before Edward was the king, he actually wanted his brother actually wanted to get the throne back, who was Alfred. But then there was a nasty thing that happened, was that this Godwin of Wessex, he actually blinded Edward's brother. So eventually, Edward needed to escape back to Normandy. So with that, he became the king of Normandy. And he just heard that Gordon of Wessex was the only person who can make him very powerful, as Gordon of Wessex is actually one of the most powerful earls in England, because he was under the Danish king Snut the Great and his successors. So actually, Snut the Great actually made Godwin the Earl of Wessex in 1020, and Edward also married Godwin's daughter Edith of Wessex. So now, who can be Edward's successors? Now, the thing about Edward was that he had no children. So when he was on his deathbed, there were three competitors who could succeed his throne, and one of them was Harold Godwinson. Now, Harold Godwinson was actually the son of Godwin of Wessex, was among the three sons of Godwin of Wessex, and he succeeded his father in being the Earl of Wessex. He was also the brother-in-law of Edward the Confessor and was a close advisor to Edward. And he was also a brave warrior who proved himself in the battle against the Welsh, and hence, in many ways, he was like a co-king. So when Edward was on his deathbed, he decided that he would become the next king of England. And then we have William the Bastard. So William was actually the Duke of Normandy. When he was only 8 years old, he was coronated as the Duke of Normandy. He was given this nickname as he was born out of a wedlock. And he spent most of his childhood avoiding many assassinations, which made him really tough. So in 1051, the town of Alençon tried to rebel against him. And the town people just bait on dead skins as an insult to his commoner mother. But he quelled the rebellion brutally. So Edward and William were actually very good friends. And Edward promised him that he could have the English throne after him. So when William actually heard the news that Edward was in his deathbed, he was like, okay, I'm going to be the next king of England. So we have another competitor who is Harald Hardrada. Now, Hardrada was the king of Norway, and he spent most of his life as a warrior. He fought for whoever gave him the most gold. He fought many wars for whoever gave him the most gold. So he fought in Poland, Estonia, the Holy Land, Sicily, Bulgaria, and against the pirates of the Mediterranean. So after getting a lot of gold within these regions itself, he came back to Norway and became the king of Norway. And a few decades before Edward's death there was an agreement between one of the previous Norwegian kings and one of the previous English Viking kings. So the agreement was that when this Viking king died, the throne would go to the Norwegian king. So with this agreement, Hardrada thought that he would become the next Norwegian king. So he decided that he would invade England and then he will become the king of England. So now we have three competitors right here. We have three competitors who are thinking that they are going to become the next king of England. So let's see what happened. What were the preparations for it? So it actually takes many months for becoming the next successor after a king is buried. But Harold Godwinson, he just decided on the very same day that Edward was buried, he became the next king of England. So after hearing this, William was actually he didn't like this at all. So he actually thought that he would become the next king of England, as it was an agreement between Edward and as well as William. So the nobles of William's nobles, they just went and they said that Harold Godwinson was doing a bad thing. He was doing a wrong thing. But Harold Godwinson just was like, no. It is my power. Then William just decided, yeah, okay, I'm going to kill this king and I'm going to become the next king of England. But the thing was that during those times they could not kill a king, because a king was actually chosen by God to become the next heir to this region itself. So what did William needed? So he needed the blessings of the Pope. So that he could attack Harold Godwinson. So he just went to the Pope and he asked for his blessings to attack Harold Godwinson, and he said a few bad points about him. So the Pope decided, okay, you can just go and attack Harold. You can go and attack him. So then there were many preparations. So William had a very big army in his Normandy region. He had a very big army and he was ready to attack England. But the only thing that was wrong about the attack was the wind. It was blowing in the wrong way. It was blowing it was blowing in the wrong way, and hence his ships and his fleets cannot go across the British river, like between the rivers between Normandy and England. He cannot go across it. So he just kept on waiting for the river. Both of them waited, both Harold Godwinson as well as William the Conqueror. And then William was like, okay, I'm just gonna go. And then he just went and he got shipwrecked. So he needed to wait for another 3 months. So for 3 months, the wind just didn't stop at all. So while those 3 months, while William was waiting for the wind to change, the thing was that who was that? Yeah, Harold Hardrada. His fleet was just coming very quickly towards the English land, and then he just landed over York and he defeated a small army there. So the thing was that within that time was that Harold Godwinson actually was very fed up with waiting for William. So he just disbanded his army into he just brought them he just told them that you can go back to your homes and all. And when he suddenly heard the news that Hardrada needed to come, just came back and he's just invading northern part, he invaded York. He was just so exhausted. He just didn't know what to do. So he just brought back his army and he landed in York in just 4 days, which is very, very quick. So with that, we can move on to what is the Battle of Stamford Bridge. So the Battle of Stamford Bridge was the battle between Hardrada and Harold Godwinson. So actually, the Harold's army was actually very well prepared for it, but whereas Hardrada's army was a little bit resting and all of that such. But there was actually legends used to say that in that bridge itself that there was one Viking soldier who just took out didn't took out entire Harold's army, but he was just plundering their entire soldiers and all, and it was really difficult to pass through that bridge for Harold's army. But then they used some deception tactics and they just took out that Viking soldier, and then they were ready. Harold's army was ready, and with that they just crossed the Stamford Bridge, and the other Hardrada's army was actually quite unprepared and they were not armed in themselves. They were not armed with their helmets and all of that such. So Harold's army just defeated Hardrada's army and Harold just killed Hardrada, which brought the Viking era in England to an end. But then what happened was the Battle of the Hastings. So while Harold just won against Hardrada, the William's army just came into England. They finally came into England as the wind just changed back to its normal position, how it was. So with that, Harold was really very exhausted. He really didn't like the way he was getting invaded and all. But still, he just came and he came very quickly, and then came the Battle of the Hastings. So then the Battle of the Hastings is actually really very complicated subject, but I'll just make it very brief. So what happened was then the English army was actually in the hill, whereas the Normans were not in the hill while they were fighting. So the Normans just were running, and then the first beginning of the battle, it was just both people just yelling at each other. Both armies were just yelling at each other, and whereas the Normans they had archery, they had bowmen and all, but the Normans they didn't had. The English army didn't had much of that such. So it was very easy at first, but then when the Harold's army was able to quell. They were able to quell, and they just found at first they were finding it very easy to fight against them, because what happened was that when the Normans they just found out, they just misunderstood that William was dead. They misunderstood that William was dead, and so they just, maybe it was deception tactic, or maybe it was just that reason, or maybe it was just some unknown reason. They just fled away. But while they fled away, the Harold's army, they just came forward, but then there was a flanking opportunity for Normans. So they used the flanking opportunity and they just took down the Harold's army, and so the rest of the army was very easy to quell. So then with that, Harold Godwinson was dead, and most of the historic legends, they predict that Harold Godwinson was killed with an arrow shooting within his eye. So with that, Harold Godwinson was dead, and William was no more a bastard. Now he was a conqueror. So now in my upcoming video, I will tell more about William the Conqueror and the way the English language was changed after the Normans conquered England. And I'll tell more about what happened after the Battle of the Hastings. And that's it for today. Thank you and have a great day ahead.